This time on Engine Masters, what is compression ratio? How much does it matter to power? And what will run on pump gas? All of that plus a pretty cool combination for a 327 Chevy. Man, I love it when a plan comes together for something expensive and complicated to answer a question that I have always wanted to test. And that question is, what is the difference between power and also pump gas sensitivity for 9.7 to 1 compression ratio versus 11.25 to 1 compression ratio? We built two complete engines to find out. So why did I pick 9.7 and 11.25 to 1? It's because I kind of think that is the range of what people would be selecting from if they're building a street engine that's got to run on pump gas. So to really get into this, let me explain what compression ratio is and why you would care. Let's start with a 4-stroke cycle. Suck, squeeze, bang, blow. Intake, compression, power, exhaust. So intake, the intake valve's open, the piston drops, the pressure drop brings in air and fuel. Now into compression. Both the valves are closed, so air cannot escape. That piston moves up and squeezes that air and fuel mixture up into a nice little ball in the combustion chamber. Then, of course, the spark plug fires. You get the power stroke because the expansion of that combustion, and then of course the piston moves up and you get the exhaust stroke. Going back to compression. Now, why are we squeezing the air and fuel into a smaller space? Well, the thing is, you've got all of that fuel that's suspended in the air, and it's a bunch of molecules floating around. When we cram them all together, we take those molecules and we shove them much closer together. And what that does is it helps propagate a big spike in combustion pressure. Basically, when you cram all the molecules together, you've got one molecule handing off the fire to another molecule at a much greater rate and a much better explosion, for lack of a better word, than you do if that gas is more expanded. So when you've got a higher compression ratio, you are squeezing all that air and fuel tighter than you do with a lower compression ratio. The ratio is the volume of the entire cylinder and chamber when the piston is at bottom dead center versus the volume when it's at top dead center. So for any given bore and stroke, that's a fixed volume. And so the things that we can do to affect compression ratio are all happening above the piston when it's at top dead center. And so there's 4 ways that we can adjust compression ratio for an engine with a fixed bore and stroke. The first way is the design of the top of the piston. You can have a piston that has a dish in it or valve reliefs like this, and because that's sort of a cup, it's increasing the volume of the chamber when the piston's at top dead center. Conversely, a piston like this that has a dome on it is taking up more space in there and therefore creating a higher compression ratio because there's smaller space up at top dead center. The next way we can adjust the compression ratio is with what we call piston deck height. That is the measurement of where this piston lands in relationship to this surface, which is the deck. It's where the head gasket goes. If it's below that surface, we call that negative deck height. If it's above, it's positive deck height. Negative deck height is going to reduce the compression ratio. Positive deck height is going to increase the compression ratio. The third way we can change the compression is with the head gasket itself. How thick is that gasket? You can see a thicker gasket makes for more volume above piston top dead center. A thinner gasket makes for less volume, so the thinner gasket raises compression. The thicker one lowers compression. And the final way is to actually change the volume of the combustion chamber in the cylinder head itself. A smaller chamber, higher compression. A larger chamber, lower compression. So that's the basics. Now let's talk about the two engines that we built in order to test this whole theory. The first thing you need to understand is that they are identical, with the exception a dish in the piston over here, or technically a valve relief, and a dome in the piston over here. Everything else is the same. These are as close as we can possibly get to the same engine. What are they? They're 331 cubic inch small block Chevys. Now this is kind of weird unless you're a really old school guy like Brule. These are based on a 327 Chevy. The stroke is 3¼ inches. The bore is 4.03 inches. So there you go, 331 cubic inches. Forged crank, H-beam rods, forged SRP pistons. Now up top, we're using the new Airflow Research Hotness. This is called the Enforcer cylinder head. It is their low buck line. I can't even believe that you can buy a set of these for about $1,000. So what AFR did is they chose their favorite low buck casting. It is not the same as their street or competition 195 head, but it is a 195cc inlet runner. It is not CNC ported. It is as cast. Camshaft, let's talk about what that is. We got Comp Cams to send us 2 hydraulic roller cams. They are their Thumper series. The duration is 227 at 50 on the intake and a big 241 on the exhaust. And the lobe separation angle is 107. And the carburetor is a Brawler 750 CFM double pumper. So I'm gonna tell you, this is actually a pretty good combo, and we're gonna show you that as we begin with the low compression ratio 331 for our first test on the dyno. First, let's chat about this with the Steves. You remember when, like, brontosaurs walked the earth and guys still built 331s?
Really clearly.
When was the last time you saw anything 327 based here at the shop?
I'll say more than 10 years.
Yeah, I know, nobody does it anymore.
Yeah. Which is a shame, because they're kind of a cool combination. They make good power for as big as they are.
Yeah, I guess so. The only reason I built them is because I got those crankshafts cheap, but it's what I could afford, so it's what we got. And now we have a couple of 331s. I think this thing's gonna run pretty good. We've already tuned it up off camera, so it's raring to go. Let's find out what it makes. This is actually pretty good.
If you told me this were a 350, I would have believed you all day long.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, these kind of power numbers, it just kind of tells me why, back when there were more, weight per cubic inch classes, why guys did these 305s and 331s and stuff. I mean, they make really good power for their size.
Yeah. Actually, let me give you the power numbers for this turd. 424 pound-feet of torque, which is what's really blowing me away, by the way, for the small displacement and low compression. And it made 440.9 horsepower, 441, which is also going to be pretty good. 441 divided by 331 made 1.33 horsepower per cubic inch. This is a pretty good little motor.
It's kind of
awesome.
It really has showed us something, I mean, about the displacement and the smaller stuff and what it can do and friction and all those things, but
don't you think BMEP is a good thing to look at here, especially compared to the compression of the other engine?
It's early in the morning and it's not corrected, so the weather's going to have some effect because that's based off of an observed number, but it is still pretty high.
Where are we?
185.
180? Wow.
A lot of times you would look at that and say, wait a minute, that's like 12-to-1 compression engine. Yeah.
That is interesting.
Part of it's morning and part of it's the engine. For a long time, Thumper cams would not have been my first pick in the Comp Cams catalog.
Yeah.
I may have just changed my thinking completely.
It's on a 107, and it's got
that's going to help torque.
It's going to help that mid-range torque, but it's got a lot of exhaust side. It's kind of why I didn't feel bad about it. I mean, for just off-the-shelf parts thrown together at 9.7 to 1 compression with a head that we didn't think was as good as a regular AFR 195 and isn't, it's good enough for this.
Makes me want to do more.
Yeah. Wow, I don't know what else to say about this except for that it's impressive for what it is.
Yeah, very impressive, yeah.
All right, moving on. We're gonna go tear the top end off of this thing and roll in our 11 1/4 to 1 compression engine.
Wow, things can only get better, right?
Yeah. Two things I did not mention about the domed piston for high compression. Well, actually 3. There's stuff you need to think about when you're installing these, one of which is making sure the dome does not actually hit the cylinder head. Sometimes the chamber shape won't be compatible with the dome. The other thing is sometimes the spark plug can hit the dome, especially on a really high compression, big block Chevy with what, like a 42cc or something like that. The spark plug hits the dome on a big block.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, big time. And then the last thing is if you have a really big dome, the dome itself can get in the way of the flame propagation across the piston. And so sometimes actually, Dulcich and I saw on a big block Chrysler once, we actually shaved the dome down. He did it with a wood router and reduced the compression and made more power. And you could see the weird flame and wear pattern on the piston. So sometimes the dome can get in the way. Slam it on there, Dulcich.
That's an electronic torque wrench.
No, I'm doing that. That's just my elbow clicking.
It's a noise I'm used to when you walk backwards.
What we did on this was we put solid roller lifters on a hydraulic roller camshaft.
All right. You got to give it a good plop.
I'm good with that.
Now we've got high compression. Everything else is identical with the exception of the timing cover, and I absolutely guarantee that does not make a difference in horsepower. All right, you guys ready? Steve, compression makes power.
It was almost like we knew what we were doing.
Well, I don't know about that. Here's our power numbers with the high compression. We made 453.9 horsepower. I'm gonna go ahead and call that 454, and 440 pound-feet of torque. I gotta see the overlay though. So now we're gonna look at low compression versus high compression. 9.7 versus 11 1/4. Interesting. I thought that it would be absolutely parallel on the whole curve. Instead, it's more down at the bottom and less up at the top. Steve, when you were tuning this up, what is the ignition timing difference between high compression and low?
We started doing that whole sweep a couple degrees at a time, and the other engine ended up at 39 degrees.
Right.
This took 41.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it doesn't surprise me.
So let's get into that a little bit. Now, typically, if we've got more efficient combustion, we tend to think that it's going to require less ignition timing, meaning maybe down to 35 instead of 41. But the other element of it is that dome in the way, and is that causing the problem?
Absolutely. In the old days, when we had the biggest dome you could fit and would hand fit them, we sometimes ended up with like 44, 45 degrees of timing for best power. I mean, it was obscene.
To be clear, what we're talking about is the reason we think that we need more ignition timing advance with the higher compression versus lower compression is that thing that I showed you in the dyno cell about the dome. It's affecting the way the flame travel goes across the piston. Basically, the spark plug ignites and it doesn't just go boom, the whole thing at once. It's still a flame traveling across that 4.03-inch bore. And the dome gets in the way and slows it down. And so you got to run more ignition timing so that the peak pressure happens at the same point, 10 degrees or so after top dead center.
Yeah, and the big thing on the small block Chevy is the spark plug position is all the way laid out on the far end of the chamber, and it's got to go mountain climb that dome all the way across. So.
Yep. Yeah. Okay, I'm glad we covered that. That was pretty interesting.
Yeah, good stuff.
So my second point is, you say crate engines are often 9.5, 9.7 to 1, which I agree with. And 11.25, a lot of old school people will consider that ragged edge. Now, a lot of late model cars have that, but they've got a zillion electronic controls that make it possible. Older carbureted garbage, can you drive this around at 11.25 to 1 compression?
I think you can if your engine is dialed in and your combination is dialed in where you're not overheating it, you don't have too much timing, you don't have the wrong advance curve where it's coming in too early and it's just overbearing, you know, with the tolerance. So
my opinion would be similar to that, but more application specific, which is in my 56 Chevy with a stick and a 457 rear gear, and the car weighs 3,000 pounds, I think you're never gonna have a problem. As a matter of fact, we drive that car at 11.25 to 1 with a 350 all the time. If you put this in an Impala with a 308 rear gear and a power glide, it's probably going to have a detonation problem.
And that's another aspect, and you can break that down to just call it loading.
Load.
If you put that thing in a dump truck, you're going to load that engine, it's going to be more likely to detonate. And intake air temperature is another one. There's all these factors that are going to determine whether it detonates or not.
I'm trying to decide if that's worth it. Like, would you take the risk if you were building this engine from scratch and wanted to run it on pump gas?
No.
No.
What I would do
is run it at 10 to
fall
1.
in the middle, like I always do.
10.25.
You know, yeah, 10.25, 10.4 maybe. Just
which
kinda
would
stick it in the
probably
middle.
fall right in the middle of those two lines.
That's probably exactly what it would do.
What is our biggest change here? Like in here, what is the difference in torque? Is 368 versus 400.
That's huge.
That's pretty big.
Yeah.
Especially in a street car where that's where you nail the throttle. You know, at 368, you may not even bark the tires. At 400, you might be putting on a smoke show.
But the other thing is compression motors, as you both know, are just snappier.
Yes, absolutely.
They just react more instead of, you know? Ooh, let's look at the specific torque on this pooch. 1.33 pound-feet per cubic inch, which is
huge.
Off the charts of what you and I would expect from a pump gas big block.
Take and turn that into a 565 big block and see what kind of torque that is.
Right.
That's 13.5, 14 to 1 compression area stuff, I think.
Okay, super interesting.
Yeah,
Any
good
other
stuff.
thoughts on just the compression ratio comparo before we move on?
Well, you asked Steve if he would run that on the street, but you completely neglected the person to your right.
The answer's a given.
All right.
So the next thing I would really like to do is gasoline related. So to this point, we've been running Sunoco 100 octane fuel because we wanted to make sure there was no detonation that was going to interfere with our compression ratio calculation. So I think what we should do now is pour 91 in it. But first, I think we should jack the water temperature way up. Like, you've been running it at 130 or something?
Yeah. So I think what we need to do is raise the water temperature now and run it on 100.
Right.
Then make that comparison to the 91 because nobody's going to run around at 135 degrees or 30 degrees where we're testing. It's going to be 165 to 85.
Yeah,
so.
the detonation tolerance is way higher at the lower coolant temp.
Absolutely.
So what we're going to do is run the coolant temp up to
165 is fine.
165, 175 degrees. And we're gonna run it again just on the 100 octane fuel because we need a baseline of what that temperature change is going to do because it's gonna make less power. And then once we've established that, we're gonna put 91 octane in the tank and run it again and find out if we can see any detonation related
Whether
or
it
any power
repeats.
loss,
Yeah.
whether it repeats. Yeah. Okay, so Brulé's gonna go warm this thing up and you'll see another pull. So Brulé's heating it up to 175 degrees of coolant temperature, and we've got 91 octane in it. Here's our final test. The red lines here are 100 octane at a high water temperature. The black lines are 91 octane at a high water temperature. Same, doesn't care. So there's a few things to learn from that, one of which is if your engine doesn't demand higher octane fuel, then higher octane fuel doesn't make more power.
No, it does not.
And the other thing is, in dyno conditions, we're not running into a detonation problem on 91 octane at 11.25 to 1 compression.
No, not at wide open throttle for sure. What I did notice was turning the engine off.
Oh, is it diesel?
It wanted to diesel a little bit afterwards, which tells me, you know, it's that drivability thing again we were talking about.
But it's also a locked out distributor, so you've got 41 degrees of timing all the time.
That's fair. Yeah.
But in the real world, you could make this detonate on the street.
Oh, I
in
believe
a certain
that.
application. High gear
Absolutely.
ratio, driving through the desert, high load, low RPM.
High underhood temperature, heavy
Yeah.
car, high gear, absolutely.
So,
But then on the flip side of that, as a real world example, I will say that my 350 that we ran on this show in the episode about what's it like at a dyno day at West Tech, it's a 350 with 11.25 to 1,
Right.
and I drive it down the drag strip in the 56 Chevy with 91 octane, it doesn't care.
no problem at all.
Yeah. Okay, so let's review what we learned on this entire episode. First of all, I'm gonna say compression actually makes a difference. It was pretty good.
Yeah, it was.
I liked it. The other thing is timing. Don't guess. I would have guessed that the higher compression would have taken less ignition timing and it wanted more because of potentially the flame travel across that dome, right?
That makes sense.
And then we also learned that in some conditions, you can get away with 11.25 to 1, even with a fairly small camshaft with aluminum heads at wide open on a light enough car.
On pump gas.
On pump gas. That's right. Pump gas being the big thing. But the good news is I think if you are out there with a 327 Chevy and you want a really good power combo, we just gave you 2 of them.
Yeah.
You just saw the power that you can make at either compression ratio, whether you've got a truck or a drag car that you want to throw together. It's a pretty sweet little motor. So I guess what we really learned is it depends, which is kind of what we see every single time when we do Engine Masters.
Running wild in the